Hello adventurers, welcome to a brand new video on the channel. Something a little bit different. I think, technically, this will be my first collaboration on the channel, and I'm very pleased to say it's with my good friend, Miss Ginny D of YouTube, and Jester Cosplay, and many other, and songs and music and so much amazing stuff, and cosplay calendars and all sorts of good stuff. Thank you so much for joining me, mate, for this, the D&D Tag, which is something you've started, and we've done a little collaboration on your channel, and now it's your turn to ask me some questions.
It is, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's absolutely my pleasure. Like I said, it's I mentioned this in your video, but you are one of the reasons I kind of got inspired to start, YouTubing again and change the style of videos that I made and just loads of stuff. I'm really excited to get to work with you and everything else. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about you, like your channel, or what kind of things can people watch on your channel and stuff like that.
Oh, sure. I'm Ginny. I have a channel where I talk about tabletop stuff and cosplay and sometimes other things, but mostly just that these days. And yeah. I have been doing videos where I talk about gameplay, but also videos where I portray characters like NPCs, where I'm role-playing with the viewer. And I also do a bunch of music stuff, too. I do D&D themed music.
Beautiful singing and wonderful music as well that you can go and check out on Ginny's channel. I have been getting a lot of requests to do some of your responses, the POV responses in character as well. I've been having a lot of people asking me to do that, so I'm going to try and see if I can get around to doing it. It's the cosplay thing which I am always held back by, so I'll try and make some of those as well.
I would love to see that. And also, you don't have to be in cosplay if it's too much. You can still answer.
I'm gonna do it in cosplay, Ginny. Let's be honest.
Because let's be honest, we're both just too extra for that.
That as well, and also and a lot of people don't know this. Like I used to be a cosplayer like a long time ago. Like that was my whole thing: anime conventions and going to Comic-Con and stuff and making my own costumes. I just kind of fell out of it, and so it's fun to have a reason to do it again as well. But anyway, without going too much into that, we've got something here called the D&D Tag. So this is a series of 15 questions that you can answer on your channel and share it with us and post it DnD Tag or something. I'm sure there'll be something that you can link it under. But yeah, Ginny is going to ask me a bunch of these questions. We're going to talk about it, and that's the video. So that's it.
All right, here we go. I'm really excited about this because I feel like these are, I know that we had both spoken a little bit about how a lot of these are questions that we hear a lot just in general, and getting to sort of answer them all in one place and just have one little spot where all of these answers are compiled, I think is a great
very
thing.
Useful. I can just link people to this and be like, hey, it's in this video. Go watch this video.
go watch me ramble about it for 30 minutes here.
Yeah.
All right, so the first question is, what was your first D&D character?
So I've been playing D&D for a while now, not as old as some folks out there. I know some folks are going to be like, I've been playing since 1st edition D&D. Not quite for me. I started playing in 3rd edition D&D. But I remember a friend of mine had like an old AD&D game, and we probably played that, but my memory is really bad. I can't really remember it. In terms of D&D characters, I honestly couldn't tell you who my first D&D character was, but my first role-playing character, like RP character, it was on a thing called a MUD, which is like a text-based MMORPG. It's just pure text, like there's no graphics or anything like that. And they were called Lorinth, and they were a human druid, and I had no idea what I was doing. It was basically just me. It was me with a fancy name, and I didn't quite understand what was going on, and that you had to be fully in character and you couldn't talk about like the real world and stuff like that. I just thought that like, oh, it's just like a video game and I can just do. No, absolutely had all of the older role players be like, no, listen, kid, this isn't how you do it, right? You've got to pretend to be in the world, and they basically taught me what role playing was. And I wrote like a description for them, and they had like they basically ended up being more like a monk than a druid. So they had like a quarterstaff, and they dressed in like Jedi robes. And I had loads of fun being like, oh, this is cool. I get to just make this stuff up and, coming up with all this ridiculous backstory. But then D&D became such a thing because I was the dungeon master for the first maybe 2 or 3 campaigns me and my friends ever played in D&D. So I never really had a character that I can remember playing early on. So yeah, it's a tricky one for me. But I think Lorinth was like the first role-playing fantasy character I ever made.
I love that you did, and I feel like everybody does this at some point, is just putting yourself into the fantasy world and being like, character!
I have done it. This is me in this world, and I have a silly name. Job done.
Perfect. Check. That's all you really need. So, out of the times that you have played, which D&D class is your least favorite to play, or which D&D class do you think you might never play?
I don't think there's a class I would never play, and up until recently I had a firm answer for this, and it was the Druid. Druids for me, the whole wild shape and turning into animals, like, I kind of like the connection to the land and nature, but the whole wild shape thing, I just was like, I'm not interested in it. It's a bit of a kind of, it just wasn't a mechanic that interested me. But now, thanks to Tasha's, we have, like, the Circle of Stars Druid, the Circle of Wildfire Druid, and those don't really use wild shape. They do their own individual cool things. And now I quite like them. I actually ended up playing a Circle of Stars Druid for like a campaign with some friends of mine as well. So now there's not a single class that I don't want to play. I like all of them. And I could definitely see myself playing all of them. So
I guess that really shows how strongly the subclasses can affect what it's like to play a class.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they give you so many cool options and different ways to portray the same character. And I think that the base classes in D&D fit such good fantasy tropes that you can always find something to play with them. You can generally find something and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this and I'm going to play that. So, all
right, question 3. What D&D spell would you most want to have in real life?
See, I feel like you had such a great answer to this in your video, because you chose Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, which makes so much sense. Like, you have a free house that you live in every day, and you don't pay mortgage, and you can take your house with you wherever you go. It's such a genius idea. I had thought about this a lot, and this ties into kind of me wanting to be an actor and being a bit more sort of like into, changing myself up. I honestly think for me, I would love to be able to cast Alter Self. And just become whoever I want whenever it took my fancy. Just be like, cosplay, I am now literally blue and I've got the horns and I can become, Jester, or I can make myself look like, a character from a game or a show, but also just for like exploring the world and just kind of blending in. And I don't know, I think there's just something cool about that kind of chameleon thing, and just kind of blending in. And also with Alter Self, you can get weird with it as well. You can just be like, I have claws now, and just kind of climbing up trees and being weird and stuff like that. I don't know. There's something cool about that, I think.
No, that's great. I think now looking back, I can see how it might be weird that as a person who's most known as a cosplayer that I didn't think about
but you
that at
you
all.
already have that ability, Ginny. That's the thing. You can already just be like, and then you're like a different person.
Yeah, except it takes like 3 hours.
Right. Imagine you could do all of that and you could just be like, shift, change, done. No makeup.
I feel like it's like not hard enough. I wouldn't feel satisfied with it. No, that's a really good answer. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I think with like the whole thing of like doing the gender changing costumes and stuff like that as well, that'd be super fun for me. So just being able to not wear wigs ever again would be nice.
Oh my god, yeah. All right, so what is your favorite D&D monster?
Okay, so this is a funny one because I think all of the people who watch High Rollers will know this. I love devils. Specifically devils. Not demons, but devils. Because I love how they are bound by laws and they're bound by rules. And if you're clever enough, you can be safe. Like, if you're clever enough, you can do a deal and you're fine. But if you're not clever enough, the DM can really screw with you. And I just love that. And all the High Rollers players hate it when I bust out. They call it the devil voice, where I'm just sort of like, oh, let's make a deal. And they're just like, no! Because they know that I've got like a million plans going on at once. And I just think they're really cool. I think the lore of like the 9 hells and the different like, archdevils and stuff is just really rad. I think that they're super cool.
That's great. I feel like that's one of the reasons I've always been really interested in the Fae, like in folklore.
Yeah, so Fae's the other one as well. Yeah, same thing, right? The archfaes and the courts and stuff.
Yeah, the whole obsession with sticking to your word by the letter of the law, if not the spirit. I just think that's great.
And all like the intricacies of the politics between like the different courts of the Fae or like the hells of the devils and stuff is just, I love that stuff. Like politics and intrigue is my jam. So yeah, I love devils.
So speaking of politics and intrigue, maybe not. What's your favorite NPC or villain that you have encountered or created?
Oh, this is a really interesting one. I think I have to kind of talk about some of the stuff I've created, because we've had like 2 major campaigns with High Rollers now, And I've really enjoyed the two main villains I've created for both of those. So in the current High Rollers campaign, Erois, we basically have sad dad Darth Vader as like the villain. So because there's like a heavy Star Wars and like space and sci-fi elements, but the main villain in that is called Callus Valkyrian, and he's kind of like an evil space emperor, right? Like he controls all these planets, but he's like the epitome of lawful evil. Like he is doing it because he knows that he is the only one who can stave off the bigger threat, like the big evil mega bad. So he is like this, controlling and like militant kind of leader, but he's doing it for the right reasons. And he still has a lot of emotions and heart, but he's just kind of buried them under what he thinks is his duty. And I love creating complex villains like that aren't just black and white, that are like, oh God, like the players at some point are like, we kind of can see where he's coming from and we kind of sympathize with him, but we know he's a bad guy and we need to stop him kind of thing. And I love creating those kind of situations. I think that's been a lot of fun to do.
I love that. I know we're like in the media world of sympathetic villains now, that we've like come around to that, I guess, in popular media, but it's just so much more interesting when a villain is evil because they really think they're doing the right thing, not because they're just like, I am evil.
And the thing is like sometimes those villains can be fun asides, right? Like you have the Joker. The Joker is a great villain because the Joker can't be reasoned with, because you can't sympathize with them, you can't predict them. They're just this force of evil that's doing these horrible things. And that can be satisfying for heroes to fight because they're like, we don't have to worry. We know that this person is bad. We're going to stop them. And I think that that's really useful to do. But then it's also good to have the villain who doesn't think they're the villain and creates those more interesting moral quandaries to kind of like fight against. I think that that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the more complexity amongst the villains, I feel like the better. It's in any story, the more variation you have on people's motivations, the more real it feels. So in terms of characters that you've created to play yourself as a player instead of as a game master, have any of your characters ever died? And if so, how did it happen?
So this is a funny one. So when I was younger, in high school and college, me and my friends, that was like my first D&D group, and we would meet up almost every day and play D&D for hours. And so we went through campaigns, and it was just the best. However, I had some sort of curse where almost without a doubt, I would not have a character who would last longer than 2 months. Like, something would happen to them. They would get killed by a trap. They would get crushed. They'd get abandoned. They'd just die in some horrible way. So I lost scores and scores of characters. And I think it's partly the reason that I have altitis now, where I make a character and then I'm like, yeah, but I need to play a new character now. Like, this character's going to die if I'm not careful. Like, it just becomes this psychological thing. But I think the one that I'll always remember the most was it was just so quintessential to this weird curse that I had. I created this, and this was, you got to remember, I was like 17. So I created this edgy elf assassin who had like given up his soul and his name, and he was called Void. It was like mega edgelord. And I had him, because my previous character had died, he entered the whole game by like swinging into this castle where the party were, and he smashed through the window and made this incredible intimidation check that scared away all the guards. And I was like, oh yeah, this guy's a badass. Yeah, this character's amazing. Literally the next round, the DM was just like, okay, roll initiative, as a beholder came up from like this pit that they were stood by, and the beholder was like ruling over the keep. Turn 1, petrification ray, failed my saving throw, turned to stone, and the party were like, well, it was nice knowing him. And then that was it. That character was done. And it was literally within, I want to say, an hour, maybe less, 40 minutes from
so
introduction
sad.
to death.
Because then it's like, why would the party try and save him if they just met him too?
They just met him, right? So, and this was the same party where like one of the characters that had survived the longest, he just basically was just like, I have met so many adventurers, I'm not even going to learn their names. He was just like, nope. Fimbletwig the gnome was just like, there's no point in learning your name. You're going to die. And then I'm going to be sad, so I don't care about you. And that was it became this whole character arc for him that he just wouldn't trust anybody again. It was amazing.
Oh, that is wild. I feel like that's something that I totally missed out on in starting D&D so late, is I just didn't have that teenager, like dumb D&D period where you get to just be like cliche and silly
edgy
and stupid.
cliche and silly, man. It was a kind of it was one of those things where I think a lot of people, they go through really bad times at school, and I consider myself very, very fortunate that in my high school and then my early college, we call it, or sixth form for us in the UK, I basically had my solid group of friends. We did everything together, and we would finish school, run home, eat food, and then meet at my friend Dave's house, because he had like a big table, and his parents were super cool about us playing D&D, and we would play D&D until like 11, 12 o'clock at night, go home, next day do the same thing. Same thing. And it was genuinely like the best. I couldn't have asked for a better kind of like school life, basically.
That is so amazing.
Yeah, super sweet. And then obviously we got in a lot of trouble in school because all we would talk about was our D&D games. So we'd be in class and we'd be like, what are we going to do tonight about the Knoll stronghold? I think that I've got this spell that can do this. And there was a lot of that going on as well. So we got in a lot of trouble with teachers. So.
Oh, man. But then you were super prepared for your actual sessions, I guess.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
So do you have like a best natural 20 story?
So it's not my story, but I was DMing. So this happened in High Rollers, okay, and it's a bit childish, but I still find it very funny.
Oh, those are the best kind of jokes.
It's so dumb. You're gonna roll your eyes when you hear about it. So in High Rollers, I have a player, Chris, also known as Trot. He's a friend of ours, and he's got a YouTube channel and everything else. And he's our comedian. Like he's very much like he plays up to the camera, and he knows he's a funny guy. And so the very first stream we did, he was playing not a joke character, but his character was very silly and very kind of rude and crude in some ways as well. And there became a situation where something like he took his trousers off or something like that. Like there was some, like he was playing up to it. Like I said that he got like covered in acid and he was like, well, I'm going to rip all my clothes off so that I don't get burnt or something like that. And one of the other players at the table turned to him and knowing who Chris was just like, well, how big are you? And kind of like looked like to gesture indicating more private areas. And Chris just, without missing a beat, he looks at me, he looks in the camera, he's like, I'm going to roll for it. Rolls it, natural 20. And it became this thing throughout the rest of the campaign that Cam had a natural 20, shall we say, manhood. And that became like a stupid running joke that continued throughout the whole campaign. At one point, one of the other characters literally used a wish to make it small for a day. Like it was stupid stuff like that. Like and that's always gonna stick with me now forever. That's like the natural 20 I will never forget.
I mean, now we know that if you have the guts to risk rolling a natural 1, you deserve the natural 20. That's true BDE.
Yeah, well, so this is the thing. So the counterpoint is a natural 1 story that's connected to this.
Oh, yes, please. I want to hear it.
So the best natural 1 story is in our second campaign for High Rollers, the Herois campaign. Chris Trott, same player, is playing Lucius, this very sort of, oh, hello, daddy. Yes, I'm a very pretty elfin boy, and he's a sorcerer, and he's very nice. And he was playing like almost like the opposite. He's like very nice, a little bit dim, but he's just like a very sweet, kind of innocent, naive boy. And we got to the same situation where his character was naked, and obviously now there's the expectation, and everybody looks at him and is like, well, you have to roll for it. And so he's like, oh, here we go, rolls it, no joke, natural 1. And again, God. It's just become, and you know, he plays it off, he's just like, well, yes, isn't everyone's that big, or something like that, you know, he just immediately goes with it. And it just, again, it's just such a funny kind of like High Rollers meme now that it's just become a thing.
These are like the kind of situations that make me feel like there's some sort of D&D god up there who's just like, you know what, screw probability, this would be hilarious.
Absolutely. You know, you do genuinely think that like Matt or the Traveler is up there pulling the strings kind of to everyone's dice rolls for sure.
All right, we're about halfway through the questions. The next one is, what is the highest level you've ever played a character to?
I think in our school game, when I was growing up in the high school game, I remember so 3rd edition was a little bit different in that when you died and your character was brought back, you came back at the lowest level of the party. And because of the way that our characters were, we had like a level discrepancy. And I think the highest level character in that was 20, but my character was 17, I think. So I've played up to the epic tier, basically.
Yeah.
And that was like, we're like fighting armies of devils and gods and all sorts of crazy stuff that we got got through. But I think most of the games I've been a player in have been between levels 5 and 12. I think that's generally when most of them tend to kind of finish off.
Yeah. Do they end, like the story arc ends, have you found, or?
In general, well, I think it's like a 50-50. 50% of the games just kind of die off because people get busy or people move on or like, we move houses or, whatever. And then 50% of the games actually have like an ending and it's just like, yep, that was the ending and that's what I've pretty much planned and that's what we've done. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it makes sense to not end a game all the way at 20 because by the time you hit 20, you're like, you're so powerful.
Yeah, so with our current High Rollers campaign, I've said to the guys, I want to try and take it to level 20 because none of them have ever gotten a character to level 20 before. Yeah. So I think that for them, I'm like, I want you guys to have that as a check mark, right? Like a bucket list of like, you got a character to 20. I know it's going to get to the point where I'm going to struggle to balance it, but I'm going to try and take it all the way up to level 20 for them. So.
Yeah, like how do you give them a villain that is going to be an actual challenge, but also doesn't just instantly kill them? It just feels hard.
There's a lot of stuff trying to figure out up here, but yeah, hopefully we can make it work.
All right, so what is your favorite magical item?
Look, this is a really cliched answer, and I know that, and I know a lot of people are going to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, because as a DM, nothing gives me greater pleasure than watching the horror on their faces when I am like, yep, and in the treasure pile, you find what appears to be a deck of cards. Would you like to open it and draw one? And I did this once to the High Rollers guys, and 3 of them who knew D&D and had watched Critical Role were like, absolutely not. We are not touching these cards. They just refused. The 2 players who had never seen it were like, what's the big deal? I'm going to draw one. And they were fighting to stop them from drawing the card. And I'm just there as the DM like, ho.
I can see how that would be like a major... That's like a mind... I don't know if you want me to curse on your channel.
Go for it.
That's a mind fuck of a magical item, though, right? Because
it really is.
Because if you don't draw from it, you're like, oh, but what if... Like, who knows what we would have drawn? But then also, like, the risks are just astronomical.
It's a campaign ender. Like, the Deck of Many Things has a reputation because it has destroyed a lot of campaigns. Because all it takes is for that one player who gets a really good draw, like, I've got 3 wishes, I've become a king, I've got this. Oh no, my soul has been permanently trapped in another dimension and cannot be recovered, and I've got the most important plot-driven quest item or whatever. So many things like that have happened, and I just love it. I love the chaos.
you embrace the chaos.
Yeah.
That's so good. So that said, knowing that you embrace the chaos, if you had an IRL alignment, what would you say your alignment is?
I embrace the chaos in a D&D sense. In real life, it was funny. So I asked Ginny this, and I loved your kind of very kind of shameful admission to being a lawful good. Like, you wish you were chaotic good, but you think you're lawful good. I honestly think, without trying to be too kind of like clever to myself, I think I'm a neutral good, because I'll do things that I know I'm not supposed to. I'll cross the street whenever I like, as long as there's no cars there.
Rebel.
Exactly, and I'll, the security, or they say that I'm not supposed to eat this many, Coke. I'm not supposed to drink this much Coke in a day, but I'm going to anyway because I
love that your like little chaoses are like jaywalking or like having a lot of sugar.
Yeah, exactly, right? I wouldn't ever do anything like horrible, which is why I think it's neutral good, not chaotic good, right?
Yeah.
Because a neutral good character is like, they still want to be generally good, but they're not going to listen to laws that they think are stupid. And that's kind of like my mindset, where I'm just sort of like, well, I can get away with it. Like, I'll do it because it's not going to hurt anybody, and I'll do that. So I think I fall into neutral good. Maybe
I think that's a good place to land.
Maybe chaotic neutral sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like a weird sort of like hovering between.
I feel like the goal should be neutral good, like, unless you somehow miraculously live in a society where all laws are just, which, like, we don't, so...
We don't, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. Like, if only we could live in such a society, but no such thing exists.
Then lawful would be an acceptable alignment. But as of now, I just feel guilty for it.
No, you shouldn't feel guilty of it. You're a good citizen doing good things. Not like a rebel who jaywalks like me.
Oh, God. You disgust me, Mark. So, if you had to date one of your characters, so this, I assume, could be like a player character or an NPC,
Oh,
Which one would
no.
you pick?
Oh no. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think, like, it's funny, like, you know, obviously probably most folks know me for Kaliana. I couldn't date Kaliana. She terrifies me. Like, because I know the things about Kaliana that other people don't know. They just think, oh, she's so sweet and lovely dragon girl. I'm like, put it this way, like, I wouldn't want to, like, be dating Kaliana and come home and, like, I've left a mess somewhere, because I don't think that would go down very well, and I worry what would happen to me.
When are you gonna give us the deep, dark Kaliana backstory, Mark? I want to know
It was one of those things where, like, I keep a very close eye on the Critical Role campaign, and I constantly think to myself, what would she be up to, what's happened to her, what kind of things would influence her. And there is definitely, like, a kind of dark timeline where, like, the Cerberus Academy, like, captures her to experiment on her, because she's, like, she's got dragon blood, right? Like, she's a sorcerer with, like, this powerful dragon's blood in her, like, what they could turn her into, and, like, kind of stuff like that. Like, I've always got, like, things like that going on in my mind. She's still good, don't worry, she's still a good girl for now, but I do like thinking of that stuff.
I'm afraid for her now, Mark.
In terms of other characters, though, I don't know. I tend to play I think out of all the characters I've played, because NPCs is a weird one. I feel like NPCs are, I don't know, they're like my children. It's a weird thing to think of them in that way. Like, too many of them are like, yeah, I've created them. But characters is different. I have a tiefling wizard called Favor that I haven't had a chance to play, who is basically Rachel Weisz's character from The Mummy. And I love Rachel Weisz from The Mummy, so I would absolutely date them, like 100%, like a nerdy kind of librarian tiefling, awkward tiefling nerd, and I'm like, yeah, I'd date them 100%.
She's part of my, like, personality inspiration for that gnome wizard that I was telling you about.
Right? She's so good. She's so good. I love her. I love her so much. So I think probably her. I think if out of all the NPCs I played, there was a centaur herbalist called Rose Meadow, who was just the most valley girl, kind of like, oh my goodness, I just love it. And I'm like, yeah, I could date her. Like, yeah, we could have a fun time. She's chill. I could do that.
Go to some magic music festivals together and
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, just like, you know, a spa day and just chilling out. And, you know, she'd go off and, like, you know, be like shopping for like organic vegan cuisine, and I could just stay home and play, you know, things like that. We could get on, I think.
I love that. So, do you have a character that you have been wanting to play but that you haven't had a chance to play yet?
So many. I am cursed by the forever DM. But yeah, I have a bunch of characters. I have gotten to play a lot more recently, so I've been kind of playing characters over a bit of time. But the latest character that I really want to kind of make my main OC, kind of like the main character that I have, is a illusionist. She's an illusionist wizard. But I have a homebrew race called Burrow Folk, which is kind of like Viera or like bunny people from Final Fantasy. And so I've built her on that. Or she could be like an elf and use like spells to kind of make her look like one anyway. But she's kind of, if Kaliana's like the sweet and innocent, Mara is her name. Mara's like my anime, like ara kind of like sexy, seductive, you know, illusionist who would torment everybody around her. And I'd kind of love that as well. Like, I think that'd be a really fun one to play, and she'd be a good laugh.
I feel like everybody needs to play like a really flirty, like seductive D&D character at least one time
at some point. Yeah, absolutely, right? Because again, it's all just make believe and pretend, and as long as all the other players around you are on board with it and are comfortable with it, why not? That's what I say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to dice, when it comes to the actual click-clack rolling rocks, are you a dice
click-clack
goblin?
magic rocks.
Are you a dice goblin or are you a dice minimalist?
I can very assuredly say I'm a dice minimalist. I have a lot of dice. I own lots of dice, but not by choice. They have been given to me, or they have, been sent to me by companies. But I don't get the dopamine from the dice sets. Like, to me, it's just a tool. I'm like, these are my dice. I will roll them. I have like one special set, which is my Kaliana set, which I bought when I did my episode. I bought them in Los Angeles specifically for that character. So those are very special to me, and are kind of like, these are precious, like, memory set. All of my other dice, because, like, you know, we've sold dice sets for high rollers. I've been given them by D&D. Companies have given me them. They're just dice sets. I actually just have a jar, like, up here. You can see, like, these kind of candy jars. I just shove them in. I'm like, I'll pull out ones that I need when I need them.
So would you be happy Would you be happy just rolling like white dice with black numbers on them?
Yeah. It's just a tool.
Blows my mind. I literally just cannot relate.
If it rolls and it's not like, got bubbles in it or it's not weighted, it rolls. I don't care.
Oh my gosh. We're so different,
that's the one thing I think we're very different on in all of these questions. Like a very other end of the scale. Like I am mega dice minimalist.
All right, final question. Which rule or mechanic have you just never quite been able to wrap your head around?
Oh man, this is one where, because when you're a stream DM as well, this stuff is pointed out to you all the time. Like when you play on stream for Twitch, like the audience will never let you forget this stuff. I still constantly get reactions wrong. Like I constantly give enemies too many reactions, or I forget players' reactions, or, I get the order of how they work wrong way round. It's just something that my brain constantly forgets. I know it, but in the moment, I'll just be like, counterspell.
I don't know how anybody is supposed to keep track, not only of everything you're keeping track of when you're DMing, but also like whether or not somebody has reacted more than once in like a, 6 round, or depending on how many enemies you have, like there could be so many people in each round.
Yep. And then you got like things like legendary reactions and lair actions if you're running like bigger monsters, and you got to try and keep track of those. And then the players, like if the players have brought NPC allies around, it's like I got to track these guys and run this stuff. And he's used a reaction, and then but has it been his turn again yet? Has he? It constantly screws me over.
Oh my god. I feel like that's not even not understanding a rule, though. That's just like you have so much on your plate. How could anyone expect you to do all of that? I feel like when I watch people DM, especially, I working with my own DMs, like in home games, we're all helping each other keep tabs on things and everybody makes mistakes. But watching people stream where there's so much like judgment on you if you mess up, or people are just so ready to tell you why you're wrong.
Well, that's the thing. And I don't mind, like, this is not to rant about it, even though you and I think we both get a little bit fed up of some people online sometimes, but it's the thing with streaming online is like what I'd love for people to understand is if a stream DM or a player makes a mistake, it's not intentional. They're not out to try and they're not trying to cheat their players. They're not trying to win the game. We just make mistakes. And I understand why people think that, especially if they've had a bad DM experience. But I think when you see people like Matt or myself or, Satine or anybody with their friends and everyone's having a laugh and a mistake happens, it's just a mistake. It's not malicious or intentional. As long as people can understand that, people can point out mistakes I make to me as much as they like. As long as they understand I'm never trying to screw people over or cheat them or anything like that.
Yeah, it's the tone that really makes it, I think. It's one thing to say, oh, did you know that this thing went wrong versus like,
oh, why have you tried to screw this? How could you? Yeah, exactly. You know this stuff. You know this stuff. But yeah, that's it for me.
Well, that was the D&D tag.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming on and asking me these wonderful questions and just collaborating in general. It's generally been an absolute pleasure to have you joining us for this, Ginny.
Of course. Thank you for doing this with me. I love getting to talk D&D with people, and getting to do it for a YouTube video is even better.
Yeah, it's the dream, right? This is literally dream career time of like we get to make this fun stuff and just that this is what we do. It's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ginny. You can. I'm going to link all of Ginny's like channels and social medias and everything else in the description and in the video. So make sure you go and follow her and check her out. And hopefully, maybe we can find some time and chances to do more collaborations in the future. I know I have an idea that I would like to do at some point with Ginny helping me, or with a certain character makeup, I think, at some point in the future. But we will try and see what we can make happen. But thanks for watching, everybody, and do the D&D tag yourself. Thank you, Ginny, once again for joining me, and do go and check out Ginny's stuff. Until then, bye-bye.